The following episode of the Maui Chamber of Commerce's Business Matters was originally broadcast on August 25th, 2026.
It's time for Business Matters, brought to you by the Maui Chamber of Commerce. Other perspectives and programming on this station do not necessarily reflect the views, values, or positions of the Maui Chamber of Commerce, which is an independent and inclusive organization serving Maui businesses and the community since 1910. Now here's your host, the Maui Chamber of Commerce President, Pamela Toompop. Good morning, Pam. How are you today?
Hey, good morning. I am great, Gary. How are you?
Doing good. We escaped from tropical storm, what was that? Moke. No problem with that. How about you?
No problem at all.
Yes.
I just came back yesterday from the Made in Hawaii Festival, where we took 7 companies from Maui to that big show. And what was interesting was they had from Lala, of course, they had some damage at the big convention center. But they got it all together in time for us, and with a looming storm, people were a little concerned. But we sailed through beautifully, and just yesterday evening, as we were loading out, we started to see some rain. But other than that, and it wasn't that heavy, so it was great.
Oh, good, yeah.
It turned out beautifully.
Yeah, we had some nice little bit of rain at our place, just enough to keep it green, which is good.
Yeah, no, I think, so I came home last night, and I don't know if we had any rain up in Pukalani, to be honest with you, last night. But, yeah, little rain is great, and we sailed through. So, hallelujah. And and it worked well, and I'm dying to hear, hopefully today, the numbers. But big crowds. They're also doing some roof repairs and things at the convention center anyway that needed to be done. So, but really big crowds and an exciting time, but also given some of the things they were going through, long hours, because they had to split up some of the activities they did with the show over several days. So it was a very long show for Neighbor Island participants because we had to fly in extra days. So bigger expense. But I think that's just a one-time thing as they work through some of the challenges they had and improve the facility. So we're excited to be home, and we're excited to see people really in love with shopping local and wanting truly authentic, locally made products. Sometimes there was stuff in there that was questionable, but the majority of it, and vendors are concerned about that because they take pride in making sure that it's truly locally made. But so many phenomenal things. It was a really great show.
Good. Hopefully the people from Maui that went over there can make up for the extra day and with extra sales.
Yes. Well, turns out it was actually fewer hours but more days. But and some longer hours, but just sometimes the crowds aren't there later at night. But there were good crowds, and people line up all the way down to, pretty much they wind around buildings even to get to this path, but all the way down pretty much to like all of Moana Beach Park.
Oh, wow.
Wow. It's a big crowd, a lot of people. So, yeah, but great fun and a great success. Everybody who participated in our space was very happy with the results. Some even pivoted in new ways. It was very interesting to see entrepreneurs take advantage of new opportunities. One of our vendors happens to be a great designer, and people saw some of her cards and sketches, and a woman kind of randomly asked, could you do commission work and sketch my dog? She started doing some sketches there, and she was getting request after request after request.
Wow.
I got 4 for each of my dogs. Started actually moving into that arena. So, which is kind of fun because that kind of leads to what we're talking about today, which is economic development, but she just pivoted. And still was selling stuff in her booth, but also was making great money selling sketches.
How cool is that?
So, yeah, it was a lot of fun. It shows, with just a great opportunity, once you pivot, amazing things can happen.
Be flexible.
Yeah. Be flexible. And on that note, I want to thank you. I know you've been very flexible, given the storms. The station's going through different things, but thank you for all you do for us and the flexibility to make sure that the programming is getting out there and we're keeping Maui informed. We truly appreciate you, Gary.
Thank you. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Well, for everybody listening today, we are continuing a multi-part series that just has continued to grow, but we're going to wrap it up today. And so the series has been building a stronger, more diversified and resilient Maui economy. And so the first part, we discussed where we came from, right? Maui's economic story, from agriculture to tourism to high tech. And, some of the things along the way, how we got here, some of the things that we're still building on in the high-tech arena, but to recognize that we have reinvented our economy before, and we can do it again. And I think that's an important message. We talked about what economic diversification really means, right? It means strengthening the foundation underneath us while creating additional economic engines so that when one sector declines, Maui doesn't fall with it, right? We need diversity. And so, but it also means that we're not looking to abandon what works. We want to tweak things as we mature our industries, like the visitor industries, which has been mature for quite some time. Some people have talked about that lately, and somebody said, we've got a mature industry, now we need to tweak it. Well, we've been tweaking it. It's a mature industry, but we have to continue to look at it and continue to make sure that it works with what's happening in a changing and dynamic world. So we don't want to abandon industries that work, but we want to best leverage the best parts of those, as well as diversify our economy. And, we looked at all of this and addressed Maui's economy today in terms of jobs, wages, tourism growth areas. And then last week we discussed, different kinds of what an economic future might look like and how do we actually build it. We discussed the industries that support us today, but we talked about some new industries that might make sense for us to grow and to attract their benefits. We explored why Maui is different from our other counties in Hawaii in terms of industry, in terms of the presence, in terms of housing, infrastructure, population, and military, and so on. And we began exploring what is standing in our way, right? What are some of the things that are hampering us from doing that? And what can we do about it? And talking about the importance of a business-friendly environment, the need for infrastructure, and more. So as we continue today, we're talking about building a stronger, more diversified Maui economy. We want to also look at some of the lessons that we can learn from other states. And this isn't to say that we want to be those other states, right? But we want to look beyond Hawaii for a moment. And we want to look at what are successful states doing. And CNBC has done this for a number of years, and there's other organizations that also do it across the nation. They look at the top states for business. And in 2026, the top states for business, there was an evaluation in CNBC, and they had a list, and not everything tracks across the board. I mean, sometimes one of the economists here in Hawaii with Yuhiro said, well, they're tracking certain systems like rail and train systems in terms of transportation that we simply don't have. Of course, now we've got the rail in Honolulu, but not in the same way as other states can reduce costs in terms of how they move product from one state to another across the nation. For example, there's some things we don't have. But they looked at Ohio, North Carolina, Virginia, Texas, Minnesota, and many other of the nation's leaders. So we're not Ohio, we're not North Carolina, and we're certainly not Texas. And, I'm not suggesting that Maui copy tax structures or development models that don't fit our values or our geography. That's not what we're here to look at doing. What we are here to look at doing is lessons that can be learned, right? And one of the biggest lessons that came out of some of these models was site readiness, how businesses can move faster today. That doesn't mean without guardrails, but when a company decides to expand, it may not be willing to wait 5 years while a community determines whether the land that they might need for their operation has the water, sewer, electricity, or time to get approval. So Georgia, which wasn't on that list I just mentioned, but Georgia provides a great example. It looks at dozens of certified industries that they would like to attract, and they've undergone significant due diligence to look at how you prepare for those industries that you want to attract. The ones that provide for higher wages so that people can have a better quality of life, that they can afford and get housing that they can live in for their residents, right? And they look at how they can accelerate timelines. And so instead of saying, come to Maui and then we'll figure out where you can go, what if we could say, here are the locations appropriate for specific industries that we choose to attract. Here's the zoning. Here's where there is water capacity. Here's where there is reliable power. Here's where there's broadband. Here's where there's appropriate transportation access for what you need to do. And here's the permitting pathway, right? And beyond that, here's the workforce programs that we're going to help do, that help you maintain and keep the workforce you need and develop a workforce that has higher end opportunities for future generations, right? And so, this is also a key lesson, looking at workforce tied directly to our employers. So Georgia has a really cool Kickstart program that combines customized workforce training for companies that they want to attract. And this matters because when a company asks, where is our workforce? The answer isn't, oh, good luck, or we'll try and work with you to build it. The answer is, we're here to help, and we have anticipated working with a company like you because you're the type of company we want to attract. So we have a philosophy, right? We are already working to create the jobs that would work for your industry. So if a renewable energy company wanted to expand on Maui, what if our college, our schools, our unions, our workforce organizations, our employer partners already had that pipeline working? We were already prepared. What if the technology company came and said, we need 50 cybersecurity workers, right? What is it that we want to grow? A food manufacturer needs production technicians, right? How do we get ready for what we want to grow that aligns? We've got a great nursing program through UHMC. We need nurses. We need doctors. That's a pipeline we've been working on. These are great examples, and some of these examples we already have. And then how do we then create it down the chain? How do we move this down to creating pathways that begin in high school and expanding on them? So we want to be clear that economic development cannot be separated from education. And there's so many ways that we can expand upon that and gear up for the industries we want. So Ohio looks at a team whose job it is to make projects happen. So here's a state where Ohio says that, they have a thing called Jobs Ohio, which is a private nonprofit economic development corporation established to operate at the speed of business. So they work across government, communities, utilities, workforce organizations, businesses, instead of forcing the company to just come to Ohio and have to navigate all these systems independently. Imagine that, a system where we are looking at what are the jobs we want to create, and we've got a way to streamline that. We talk about the challenges in Hawaii of a business-friendly model and needing to have a business-friendly model, which these states also are considered, again, high up in that arena as well. And the absence of that puts us at a disadvantage because so many states like us are having to compete for these types of positions that will get us to the quality of life that our local Maui community, our Maui County community, our state of Hawaii community seek. And more importantly, the type of living our future generations seek. They are seeking things beyond what we have available for us now, and it takes a system. And so you're going to hear a lot about preparing for the workforce that we want to attract, in addition to these industries that we need to attract, to get us to the place that we are having the quality of life that aligns with what we seek here in our community, as well as what our youth and future generations want for their livelihood. Virginia has a program where they actually prepared the site and the workforce. So they have a really great roadmap. They are ranked number 2 nationally for infrastructure, and CNBC's 2026 analysis said that they have invested heavily in business-ready sites. So they have a program that had 127 state-certified sites and they, of course, had to invest in the funding for these sites to make sure that they had an expedited permitting program specifically for business-ready sites, putting the businesses in sites that worked for the industry, but also worked for the community. Where are we doing this economic development, right? Where are we creating these new jobs? Where do we want to put them that works for what we're trying to do? That's one of the lessons that was done in developing the visitor industry as we were diversifying from agriculture, right? We chose sites specifically to put the visitor industry that was outside of our main residential areas. So yes, in the far past, there was, a hotel in Wailuku for a period of time, but over time that changed. But we have focused on, right, West Maui and South Maui regions in areas designed specifically where we were going to put the visitor industry. And things have changed and shifted here and there over time, but we still see predominantly that's where those areas in the visitor industry continue to be centralized. And so Virginia was looking at this, but in a broader way. What kind of other industries are they looking to attract, and how do they specifically gear up for that, right? Where they put in big investment in investing in this. And there are things that, of course, we are looking at today, like enterprise zones that the state has allowed. But how do we go beyond saying, okay, well, we've got these enterprise zones, and they're really a great place, and there's certain advantages if you do business in these enterprise zones. There's certain tax breaks and other things that you can benefit from. Well, they make sure that when they're promoting these types of things, that they're making sure that there is significant investment for expedited permitting once you get in there, not just here it is, this is a great place. Now we're going to streamline your permitting to get you on there and ready as quick as possible. We're going to tie it in with workforce development programs. In streamlining the permitting, we're going to ensure that you've got the water capacity, the sewer capacity, right, that you've got access capacity for what you need to do. So it's really also tied for them with what they call a talent accelerator. So they have customized recruiting and training programs also around incoming and expanding businesses for their employers that they're trying to attract. So they have what's ranked as a number 1 customized workforce training program that they've been doing now for 4 consecutive years. So, as we look at this and say, okay, well, how does this apply to Maui? Well, if we're recruiting, let's say, space optics, ag tech, healthcare, clean energy, advanced construction companies, right? We want to make sure UH Maui College and our workforce partners and our businesses that we are not only trying to attract but also grow here in the areas that we want to see. We want to make sure that all of them are at the recruitment table sharing what they have available and how to build this workforce from day one. Not come and we're going to send you here to this nonprofit or this college or this planning, arm of the planning department, or we're going to send you to understand our wastewater system and our shipping systems. We have to start looking at things very holistically, and we have to engage our business community in this process because the jobs are coming from the industries that are growing and expanding opportunities and building the workforce, right? We need everybody at the same table at the same time working together. So, when we tell this company, if you move here and you create these 75 jobs, right, we need to tell them that we're going to help ensure that they have the skills they need, that we're going to create the training programs that are going to help. And if we're going to attract certain industries, we want to start thinking about creating those skilled jobs now. North Carolina also is, features talent in economic development. So North Carolina has ranked number 1 or number 2 for six consecutive years in Economic Development Organization credits that focus on deliberate investment in workforce competitive sites and modern infrastructure. So as a result of that, they had a net gain of 84,000 residents from other states in the most recently reported year. Okay, and that's, we're not saying we want to attract 84,000 residents from other states. Okay, I want to be clear. That's not what we're trying to do. But take that in contrast to Maui's population loss and our concerns with losing Ohana, right? And our concerns for creating the jobs that our youth want. They're clearly saying, and a minimum wage, I get a little frustrated sometimes because, again, a minimum wage, people always say, well, our minimum wage is this, and that's not a living wage. It's certainly not. And by the way, a minimum wage was never meant to be a living wage. It was meant to be a starting wage. It's always been meant to be a starting wage, recognizing that as people move up in their ability to work, to be of value to the company, to continue to grow in their positions, and they've been trained by the company, they're more valuable, they move up. There are always wage increases. A minimum wage was meant to be a starting wage for new labor, for people who are moved. Maybe it doesn't mean that you didn't come with skills, but you might not come with skills for the industry you want to grow into. It's a starting wage. That's what it's meant to be. But the bottom line is, we know what a minimum wage is and how it applies to different industries, and different industries have, there is a state, minimum wage. That's a law. And sometimes they keep moving it up without any increase in production to the businesses, which is why the businesses say, we've got a hardship. You're creating a gap that's not sustainable. But when industry works together with government and we start planning these programs to attract the kind of industries we want, then we can start to see, and we have recognized in Hawaii that we have a very high challenge, right? Because our costs are so extreme here to meet what's called a living wage. We've got a significant problem to meet what's called a living wage that gives us a quality of life, that allows people to have the type of housing they'd like to have, that gives them a career pathway to get to that quality of life. And now we've got a younger generation saying, we don't just want a living wage, because they're saying they're not necessarily attaching that to quality of life, which it's meant to be, right? A living wage is meant to be expansive, that includes a quality of life. But now a younger generation is saying we want a thriving wage, okay? And love the thriving, right? Love the concept behind the thriving, which a living wage was meant to encompass. But we're coming up with new terminology. But the question is, how do we measure that? And how do we set expectations so people don't think, hey, on day one, I start the job and I've got a thriving wage. Whether they're a skilled laborer or not, I'm going to come in and I'm going to be earning a thriving wage because I need a thriving wage for the quality of life I desire, for the type of housing I want, for the location I want to live, for the things that I want to do. So, but we need to include this thriving wage concept into where we're going because we're looking to build for those future generations. That's what we're striving to do. So, there's many lessons that we can look at here. Again, we're not saying we want to be these other states. We're not saying what they did works for us. But what we are saying is when we look around as we're building our plan, there's a huge lesson. Sometimes we look at all of this and we think jobs, we think workforce, right? So, the success of other states is that they're always increasing how they think. And I love that many states are saying, okay, it's not just jobs and workforce. They're looking at it like the vision that we want to have. It is that quality of life. Maui has long been focused on that quality of life. In fact, that quality of life, we're a business organization at the Maui Chamber of Commerce. We think about economic development and diversification all the time because it's that business sector that is diversifying our economy and creating jobs. But in our mission is our quality of life. It always has been in the Chamber's mission. It's about our quality of life. But quality of life isn't independent. Quality of life it's quality of life plus housing, plus education, plus workforce, plus companies, plus jobs, right? Businesses follow talent, and talent follows opportunity, and that creates livability. So the application for us is our economic development strategy, right, that we talk about is keep our families home. And when we talk about keep our families home, the way to do that is developing a diversified economy. We have to look at this holistically. So we're not looking at the same strategy as others, but in some cases, again, we have to look at what creates that holistic strategy. And it's housing, it's childcare, it's education, it's broadband, it's healthcare, it's wages and career opportunities. These aren't separate social programs sitting beside economic development, which many of them are in our state and our county. It's this program and that program. But and again, I used to run Maui United Way, right? We served a number of these areas in Maui United Way. But we have to look at this holistically and look at how we do this and create a new economic development infrastructure. In Texas, they treat economic development as a team sport. So they describe it very simply. Economic development is a team sport. The Governor's Economic Development Office works with local, regional, and statewide organizations, state agencies, communities, businesses, entrepreneurs. Rather than having disconnected organizations competing with one another, they combine them together. And that's highly transferable to Maui, right? And we're a smaller region, so it's much easier for us to collaborate together. They have tremendous organizations and assets, but what they're doing is they're connecting the dots. And that's really critically important. And not only are they connecting the dots between regions, like we can do, even though we're separated by bodies of water, right? We need to look at this holistically. We talked about the other week, what's unique between Maui and our other islands within our state, our other islands within our county. But how do we create systems that leverage our uniqueness but also attract what all of us need on each island? And yes, you're going to have certain areas with pockets of excellence, but is there ways to leverage off of each other? And then, how do we leverage and best utilize these different organizations or entities or departments, right? You have all sorts of things going on. Let's just talk about, for example, economic development. You've got economic development boards across the state. You've got the state's Department of Business, Economic Development and Tourism. You've got the High Tech Development Corporation, right? You've got silos in industries that have economic development expertise for their industry. You've got the University of Hawaii, and that here locally at UHMC, but also the University of Hawaii Economic Research Organization, right? So we have, of course, in schools, you've got different workforce training programs with us in the schools. In our major industries, you have people working in the industries that have tremendous industry economic development experience. You've got to connect people with the jobs and the workforce organizations. So there is, Texas is another interesting model that we can look at and say, look at how they're creating all of this stuff in tandem and working together. How can we better work together in our state? Again, we're not trying to be that state. But what we're saying is, especially when we're siloed by bodies of water, but thank God broadband and other technologies unite us, how can we look at this? How can we change our mission? How can we agree on a destination that we can start making some strides on, but a destination for future generations that has a vision that goes 20 plus years out? Okay, and we started that. I was on a task force. I was on the state's task force. It was for 2050, sustainability for 2050 out. And this was a state program where all of the neighbor islands got together as part of a statewide system to look at the strategies. And again, we were doing that in, I think, 2004. I joined the chamber in 2006, so I was doing it when I was at Maui United Way, and a bit continued on a bit when I started at the Maui Chamber of Commerce. And we were planning out for 2050. And it was a sustainability plan, recognizing it's not just about business attraction, right? It's about sustaining families in Hawaii. It's about those thriving wages that our kids would like to have, that we have to find a pathway to get them there. We need to continue that work, not take that plan and put it on a shelf. And there is a metric, because people fought to go back and say, hey, wait a minute. We have to look at this plan every year. So there is a metric. Is that shared statewide? Are all of you familiar with it? The answer is no, right? But should we be? Should we be reinvesting in that plan that's old at this point? Technology has changed in ways that is gone above and beyond what we expected just even that far back, right? Look at AI, things are changing. But this is a time when we have to look at all of this and say, wow, where do we go next? Where do we go next? And how do we do that? I'm going to mention one other thing that I think is really important. Right after the break, we're going to talk about something that Minnesota has done. So we're going to take a quick commercial break here and then continue on with something Minnesota has done, where they've combined infrastructure and quality of life, and they've combined it together. But there's so many possibilities, and now we're getting ready to kind of revamp where we've been to where we need to go and continue on. We'll be right back after a quick commercial break.
One business can have a great idea, but when Maui's business community comes together, our collective voice can help shape the future. That's the power of the Maui Chamber of Commerce. We listen to our members, bring forward the issues that matter, advocate for solutions, and work with government, business, and community leaders to help Maui move forward. And we do it by bringing people together around what we share, not what divides us. The Maui Chamber is nonpartisan and non-sectarian. We don't represent a political party, ideology, or special interest. We represent our members and champion a strong, sustainable Maui. Whether we're advocating for housing, infrastructure, economic diversification, workforce development, small business, or a more resilient future, we believe progress happens when people come together, listen to one another, and work towards solutions. Your ideas matter, your business matters, your voice matters. Add yours to ours. Join the Maui Chamber of Commerce. Together we can help shape the Maui we want for generations to come. Visit MauiChamber.com today.
right, welcome back to Business Matters. You're up, Pam.
Thank you, Gary. Okay, so here's another interesting state. Actually, it was my father's home state, but he had left it a long time. I've never even been to Minnesota, to be honest with you. But Minnesota looked at infrastructure plus quality of life together and felt that they belong together. So Minnesota is especially interesting because it demonstrates that business friendly doesn't have to mean, that we have to give all these tax incentives and deregulate things. And we're not trying to deregulate. When we talk about speeding up permitting, we're talking about speeding up a timeline, right? We're not talking about avoiding protections. I think that's really important to be clear. But Minnesota finished number 5th overall in CNBC's ranking for 2026. And they were in the top 10 quality of life, infrastructure, and economic development. So the state had made more than $8 billion in infrastructure investments since 2019, including major investments in water, transportation, and asset preservation. So this aligns really beautifully with our values, right? We don't need to be the cheapest place in America to operate. And by the way, that's not going to happen because we are, again, separated by water. We have one of the highest costs of living. It's just realistically not going to happen. But we can be one of the best places to build the right kinds of businesses that means quality of life that matters for our future generation. Looking at how environmental quality matters, education matters, healthcare matters, community matters, culture matters, housing absolutely matters. Aren't these all the things that we are talking about each and every day as we look to the Maui we want for future generations? So the biggest thing that Minnesota did was they reduced uncertainty. And this is something we talk about when we talk about permitting. When you're building a business, people don't invest when there's tremendous uncertainty, right? And we've got some black eyes on some major investment that we saw that is now gone. And that makes people even more squeamish. So this is a really important takeaway from some of the states that I mentioned, right? Sometimes a business can accommodate higher costs, but businesses have to have more certainty because uncertainty, like lengthy permitting, just it stifles investment and sometimes takes investment away. So, will the permit take 3 months or will it take 3 years? Will the water be available? Can I get power? Where will my employees live? When people come in and do investment in a region for economic diversification, one of the top questions I know because I used to try and attract high-tech investment. That was part of my job. First question, where will my employees live? Will they be able to have a good quality of life if we move our industry here? For business, the quality of life for their employees is extremely important. It's among the top 5 things that they consider. Quite frankly, it's generally among the top 3. First, can we actually do it here is number 1, right? What are the conditions that tell us whether we can even consider it before we consider moving our employees? But employee housing and their workforce is critically important. Will I find trained workers? Will the zoning change? If I make an investment here and somebody makes a zoning change down the future, what will that mean? How many times are we reversing decisions here? What message does that send in industry attraction? It's a huge problem. Who do I call when something gets stuck? If something's stuck in the permitting process, yes, you can track some things online, but what are the next steps? How long will it take? Who do I call? What if it's a minor thing that I can quickly move forward? Is anybody letting me know? If it's a major thing, how do I quickly work together to get it solved? So rather than anything goes, rules that are strong, rules that are clear, rules that say if you meet them, we will help you succeed. That's critically important. Another thing we look at is, and this is not just about, now I'm going from some of these lessons from across the state to some things that are really critical in economic development. And we've talked about them before in part 1 and in part 2, right, which is a cluster strategy. We leverage the visitor industry to cluster other industries, right? Restaurant, retail, activities. So successful regions don't just attract random businesses. They build ecosystems. One aerospace company attracts suppliers. Suppliers attract talent. Talent attracts startups. Universities create programs. Investors discover the cluster and invest more, and momentum builds. So in Maui, we should ask, where do we already have the beginnings of clusters? Agriculture and food, hospitality, space and optics, energy, environmental sciences, ocean sciences, creative industries, right? We have people who are doing film and television, and we've had videographers for years, our fabulous musicians who suffered during COVID when they saw a lot of the jobs that they had in places to play lost. Creative industries is huge and growing. Construction. We will always need construction, but so many opportunities for diversified construction, new ways to build houses, new needs in housing. And certainly we have a lot of needs in housing, right? We need to house our workforce. Our people are screaming and crying for housing solutions, and we have been for over decades. Right? Actually, we should have been 2 decades ago, but we really have gotten it over the last decade. Health and wellness, doctor shortages, nursing shortages, support for small businesses that can grow. So we can learn from, these different places, but we need to look at how do we in Hawaii, in Maui County, build island innovation clusters around the problems that the world increasingly needs to solve. Food security. We've got great land, right, for food security, for growing crops that regions like Japan think are so beautiful and pristine, where there's a premium they'll pay for Maui produce. Food security, housing affordability, resilient infrastructure, clean energy, climate adaptation. Look at what we're going through. Where do we have unique skills that we've learned? Disaster resilience. What can we learn from what we've gone through? High value tourism. How we can learn to look at our aging population and create new things to support them, but also teach lessons across other states in the nation. Look at public systems and how we're going to streamline things and create new models. So how do we look at things that we want to do, say agritech, and pre-identify appropriate ag lands? Well, we've got ag parks, right? Which is great. That was a great start. How do we build on them? How do we modernize them? How do we move that from growing to food manufacturing? How do we look at different things that we would grow in new technologies, maybe in medical technologies, maybe in innovative products for health? How do we look at, with our housing crisis, housing innovation? Why are we stopping solar tax credits? Okay, again, that was a federal level. But, come on. How do we create broader clean energy that we want in our community? How do we look at creative, innovative technologies? And how do we expand on clusters? Clusters here in Maui, clusters across our islands in Maui County, clusters that leverage other clusters on each of our sister islands, and clusters across our state, right? How do we bring permitting down? We had an individual that we talked to who's running for office that said, under the Linda Lingle administration, they got permits done in 3 days. And somebody again said there was questions, and people said, 90 days would be great. At this point, people said 6 months would be great. And the person said, when we've proven it's done, and we've talked about 4-leaf, and 4-leaf is doing things in 45 days. This person said, I personally benefited when then Mayor Linda Lingle got a permit that was stuck done in 3 days by bringing people together. And we've heard other mayors in other counties have done this too. We've heard one day, periodically, the mayor would call a session together where all the departments were together, and they would assess and they would brainstorm, and they would come up with they'd come up with the solution in 1 day. Okay, now we're not there yet. But the bottom line is, and the point this gentleman made, was if it was done in the past with the technology we have today, why can't we do it now? Why are our expectations so far out when in the past, decades ago, it was done? It was proven. There's history. Why are we avoiding that and not accelerating toward that? That's something we need to look at. And again, as you've heard me say recently, we have gotten off the dime on screaming for housing and economic development and diversification, because if we don't have the infrastructure, how do we build it? So now we have to get back to how we're going to strategically plan, right? And there's big issues we're talking about water, and we need to talk about water. We need to talk about water and our capacity. We need to look at our sewer systems. We need to modernize some of these things. How do we maximize our broadband? How are we going to deal with our energy, transportation, all of the things that are critical, not just for attracting businesses, for the quality of life we desire, right? This is about our quality of life. The Maui Chamber of Commerce, yes, is a business organization, but quality of life has always been built into our mission, right? We've never been about, let's create a big industrial revolution, and it's going to be all about industry without caring about our environment and our quality of life. That's never been who we are. And it's not who we are today, and it's not going to be who we are going forward. So we need to look at these systems, and we can't grow and develop what we don't measure. Are we on track? Where are the metrics for the things that we desire? Are we keeping up with housing production? Are the permitting delays hampering the housing and infrastructure capacity we're screaming for? Where are we at on the environmental protection? Where are we at in attracting industries that create higher wage jobs so that our youth who want a thriving wage have a shot at it as we define it? Where are we on workforce retention? Where are we in sustaining our ohanas here at home? Do any of you know? Should we know every day? Are we going to waste, are we going to say, well, we're only going to measure this? Oh, we'll measure it every 5 or 10 years. Sort of like now we're back to an annual review of the Hawaii 2050 Sustainability Plan. Is that enough? When technology is changing every minute we speak, we need metrics. How do you get there if you don't measure it? How do you know if you're off path? It's time that we have to start focusing on these things. We need a cohesive system. Maui needs a cohesive system. We need a diversification strategy is not something that you look at 5 years out. You need to look at a really strong strategy with a 20-year plan at least. Okay, but even then, a 20-year plan doesn't do anything if you're not measuring it and constantly looking at it and making adjustments. That's where we need to go, right? We have to measure what we're trying to attract, make sure we're on track, make sure it is giving the benefits to our community that we expect, that it's not overtaxing our environment, right? That we are creating the appropriate infrastructure, that we're leveraging new technologies, that our workers are trained so that they're not expecting a thriving wage on day one when they don't have the skill sets, but they see the career path to get them to the life that they want, where we are creating exports and selling to markets that love Maui, that love Hawaii, that are willing to come here because of that love and have the experience of aloha, where we generally are sharing our aloha, and we are thrilled to have them because of what they contribute back, but also to welcome them under the presence of peace that Auntie Palahipaki saw as a way for the world and said people will come to Hawaii and cherish Hawaii for our aloha. But for that to happen, as one gentleman said, if we have more housing, we'll have more aloha. To have more housing, we need jobs that support people being able to have the housing. We need the infrastructure that gives us the opportunity to create that housing. We need to develop stronger plans. We need to move out of silos, even on our own island. And I mentioned some examples of that. Even on our own island, we have some silos. And we have organizations working in many different arenas, and sometimes in tandem. We've got the Maui Economic Recovery Commission trying to help us work more in tandem on our Lahaina recovery. And we've got diverse things. Of course, yes, looking at housing and rebuilding, looking at business rebuilding. We've got people saying today, you know, we had to focus on housing first, and we had to focus on housing. Absolutely. For those families who lost their housing for that town, absolutely. But could we have done it in tandem? Could there have been a different plan where as we focused on the housing, we also focused on rebuilding the industry so that when the housing was built and those people were getting back to having to pay their mortgage, they had the jobs to support it? Well, we did our best. We've worked really hard. We learned a lot of lessons. We're still learning lessons. But when we work together instead of in silos and we focus on this, we need to also look at, we just had a great economic update, and it was great when we all come together. Honestly, everybody said it was great to come together again and revisit this when we're looking at doing this such important work. And we'd been apart for, we'd had sort of an interim hop, so it wasn't a full 6 months. But, it was a period of time between when all the groups got together and all presented fully, and we shared, where we even had state organizations coming back in, not just the Maui groups and sort of our interim hop, but where we were sharing and even then so excited about what each group was doing. But then we brought back the full group that included people from statewide, that included funders, that included a broader group. We need to get back together more often, but more importantly, we need to change the structure of our system, where we're working more cohesively together between our government, our nonprofits, the business sector, all of the different organizations in between to build a sustainable Maui County, to get to the things that are near and dear to our heart, are going to give us a thriving wage and give us the quality of life that we desire. We're going to do it together. That's the plan we want to see. Thank you for joining us on this economic development journey. There will be more because the work continues. But let's do it together. Let's do it with aloha. In the meantime, I want to wish you blessings and aloha and say I hope you'll join us again next Tuesday for Business Matters. Ahui ho.